I want you to just picture the absolute most mundane utilitarian object you can possibly think of.
Okay, I am trying to picture it.
All right, like something heavy, loud, and just completely devoid of any glamour whatsoever. Um, think of a heavy-duty commercial-grade blender.
Oh, like the kind you might see hidden in the back kitchen of a smoothie shop somewhere.
Exactly. Now, how does an object that something with absolutely zero natural sex appeal somehow rack up hundreds of millions of views online?
It sounds impossible.
Right. And not just views, but it becomes this massive cultural phenomenon and skyrockets its company's retail sales by an astonishing 700%.
700% is just absurd for a kitchen appliance.
And oh, by the way, they did all of this with a total marketing budget of $50.
We 50,000?
No, literally $50. Just 50 bucks.
That is wild.
Or, okay, consider a completely different scenario. Think about the cutthroat world of fine dining.
Which is a notoriously difficult industry.
Exactly. 1 in 4 restaurants fails in its first year. So you have this luxury boutique steakhouse in Philadelphia, and it is teetering on the edge of obscurity.
Right.
How does that restaurant save itself from going under? By putting a $100 cheesesteak on the menu.
$100 for a cheesesteak. That feels like a typo.
I know, but we usually operate under this deeply ingrained assumption that, if a business or an idea is succeeding on a massive scale, there must be a mountain of cash behind it.
Yeah, we picture Madison Avenue ad executives and multi-million-dollar celebrity endorsements.
Right, or these omnipotent algorithms just artificially pushing content into our feeds. But when you step into the real science of social transmission, all of those traditional rules just completely disintegrate.
They really do. We are looking at a landscape driven not by the deepest pockets, but by a hidden psychological code.
It is like a neurological operating system, right?
Exactly. It dictates exactly why certain things catch fire and spread from person to person, while millions of other ideas or products they just vanish into the void.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. We are going to deconstruct that exact psychology.
It is such an important topic.
It really is. And we've got a fascinating stack of sources on the table in front of us. But our primary anchor is the groundbreaking research of Jonah Berger.
Right, the marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yes. And Berger didn't just, collect a bunch of fun anecdotal stories about marketing wins. He spent over a decade applying rigorous, peer-reviewed scientific methodology to the concept of social influence.
Which is so rare. Usually it is just gurus giving opinions.
Exactly. He analyzed thousands of New York Times articles, studied the behavioral patterns of millions of consumers, and looked at countless brands to answer one question.
Out of the millions of ideas competing for our attention every single day, why do only a tiny microscopic fraction actually become contagious?
Right. And our goal today is to synthesize that mountain of academic research into actionable, mind-bending insights that you, listening right now, can actually use.
And I would argue that digging into this specific body of work is more critical right now than at any other point in human history.
Really? Why do you say that?
I mean, think about the sheer volume of the information overload we are all experiencing. We are absolutely drowning in content.
Oh, for sure. It is exhausting.
Right. And in response to that, you have companies, nonprofit organizations, politicians throwing vast sums of money at social media gurus.
And self-proclaimed digital influencers.
Exactly. Desperately hoping to manufacture some kind of cultural buzz. It is a frantic scramble for eyeballs.
It really is.
So Berger essentially wanted to cut through all of that expensive noise. He wanted to understand the underlying evolutionary and behavioral drivers of the human animal.
Like, why do we open our mouths to share a piece of information in the first place?
Yes. What is happening in our brains when we hit the forward button? Whether you are an entrepreneur trying to launch a new software or a local community organizer saving a park.
Or honestly, just someone trying to get your stubborn friend to read an article you found fascinating.
Exactly. Understanding the literal science of social transmission is the only reliable way to ensure your message actually survives.
I want to stop right there because Berger's central thesis completely dismantles everything I was taught in business school.
Oh, it is a total paradigm shift.
He forcefully argues that virality is not born, it is engineered.
Right.
Because we have this romanticized notion that some things are just inherently cool, like a sleek new sports car or a trendy fashion brand.
And we assume those things just naturally spread on their own.
Exactly. Meanwhile, we assume that boring things like dish soap or tax software are doomed to require massive advertising budgets just to stay relevant.
But Berger's data proves that word of mouth is actually driven by the message itself, not the messenger.
Yes. And by the way, he points out that word of mouth is at least 10 times more effective than traditional advertising.
10 times.
10 times. Because we trust our friends way more than we trust a billboard.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if you tell me a movie is good, I will go see it. If I see an ad, I just ignore it.
Exactly. So his ultimate conclusion is that absolutely any product, any idea, or any human behavior, no matter how incredibly mundane it might seem on the surface, can be engineered to be infectious.
If you follow a specific framework, right?
Yes, a framework of 6 psychological principles. He calls this the STEP-PS framework.
The paradigm shift here is how Berger forces us to stop looking for the quote-unquote right people to spread our message.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for a very long time, especially in the early 2000s, the prevailing theory in sociology and marketing was the concept of the law of the few.
Oh, right. The idea that a few special people drive everything.
Exactly. It suggested that social epidemics are driven by a tiny handful of exceptional, highly connected individuals. The mavens, the connectors, the trendsetters.
So the strategy was just to find the alpha influencer, give them your product, and watch it turn to gold.
Right. The industry became obsessed with that idea. But Berger's quantitative research reveals that this conventional wisdom is actually statistically flawed.
Wait, really? Influencers aren't the key?
I mean, yes, persuasive and highly connected people exist. But highly contagious content is so intrinsically viral that it will spread like wildfire, regardless of who is doing the talking.
Okay, I need an analogy for this.
Think about a truly brilliant joke. If a joke is structurally perfect, it doesn't need a famous, professional comedian to deliver it for people to laugh.
Oh, that is a great point.
You could have the most awkward, introverted person at a dinner party mumble the punchline, and the room will still track up. The humor isn't in the speaker.
The humor is baked into the DNA of the joke itself.
Exactly. Contagious content operates on that exact same mechanical level.
Okay, I hear you, and the joke analogy is brilliant. But I have to throw a massive flag on the play before we go any further.
Uh-oh, what is it?
When we use the word viral today, we are almost exclusively talking about getting lucky on the internet.
Right, the algorithm.
Yeah, we're talking about the mysterious whims of the YouTube recommendation algorithm, or catching a trend on TikTok.
Or going viral on a Twitter thread.
Exactly. To say that virality is engineered feels a bit disconnected from the reality that we are all just at the mercy of Silicon Valley server farms. Doesn't catching on just mean hacking the digital feed?
I am so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because that is the default assumption for almost everyone living in the digital age.
I mean, it feels true.
It does. But it brings us directly to what might be the single most stunning, paradigm-shattering revelation in Berger's entire body of research.
Okay, lay it on me.
When researchers ask marketing executives, or even just average consumers, to estimate what percentage of word-of-mouth communication actually happens online, the guesses are incredibly high.
What do they usually guess?
People usually estimate somewhere around 50, 60, or even up to 80%.
Honestly, I would probably guess like 90%.
And logically, that makes perfect sense to us. You and I spend hours staring at screens every day. We constantly see share buttons and retweet counters.
Yeah, we feel surrounded by digital chatter.
But when you look at the actual hard data specifically, the massive studies conducted by the Keller-Fay Group, the actual number is staggeringly low.
How low?
According to their research, only 7% of word of mouth happens online.
Wait, I need you to repeat that.
7%.
Are you saying that out of all the recommendations, all the gossip, all the sharing of news and products that happens in human society, only 7% of it is happening on social media and blogs?
That is exactly what the data shows.
Because my brain is actively rejecting that statistic right now. I feel like my entire feed is just people sharing things with each other constantly.
It is deeply counterintuitive, I know.
Yeah.
But the reason we so vastly overestimate online word of mouth is due to a cognitive bias known as the availability heuristic.
Okay, unpack that. What does that mean?
Online communication is highly visible and permanent. It leaves a distinct digital footprint. You see the exact number of likes on a post. You can trace the links.
You can literally read the comment threads.
Right. It is quantifiable, so our brains register it as significant. But we systematically discount the overwhelming volume of offline conversations simply because we cannot see them.
Oh, because they are invisible.
Exactly. There is no digital dashboard recording the 5-minute chat you had with your coworker while waiting for the elevator.
Right, or the conversation I had with my neighbor across the driveway yesterday.
Or the stories you swapped with 3 friends over drinks on a Friday night. When researchers actually track human behavior, they find that while people might spend a couple hours a day online, they spend vastly more time interacting offline.
So we are essentially looking at the tip of the iceberg and ignoring the massive underwater structure.
Precisely. And there's another qualitative difference that the data highlights. Online conversations often resemble a broadcast.
Like shouting into a crowded room.
Right. You tweet a link, and it technically reaches a feed of 500 followers. But offline conversations are entirely different. They are intimate, deeply targeted, and highly contextual.
Give me an example.
If you are sitting across from a friend and you tell them about a new Thai restaurant, you are doing so because you already possess the specific knowledge that this particular friend loves spicy food.
So the conversion rate on that face-to-face recommendation is astronomically higher than a broadcast tweet.
Astronomically higher. So the key takeaway here is that while the internet is an incredible piece of technology, it is merely a medium. It is not a strategy.
Right. Simply posting an idea on a digital platform does absolutely nothing to guarantee that another human being will actually open their mouth and advocate for it.
Exactly.
That completely reorganizes how I view communication. If we are obsessing over the 7% of digital interactions and totally neglecting the 93% of real physical human interaction, we are losing the game before it even starts.
But they're fighting over crumbs.
So if the goal is to tap into that invisible 93%, we have to stop asking, how do I get more retweets, and start asking a much deeper, almost anthropological question. What are the underlying psychological triggers that compel a human being to open their mouth and speak to another human being?
And answering that exact question is what the STEP PS framework is designed to do.
Awesome. Let's get into it. What is the first principle?
The first principle, the first S in the acronym, stands for social currency.
Social currency. I like the sound of that, but break it down for me. How does information act like money?
Well, think about the function of actual fiat currency, dollars, euros, yen. We use physical money to purchase goods and services that we want or need.
Right. I hand over a $20 bill, I get a sandwich.
Exactly. Social currency operates on a parallel but entirely psychological economic system. Instead of buying physical goods, we use the things we say to buy positive impressions from our social circles.
Oh, wow. So we are buying status.
Yes, human beings are deeply evolutionarily wired to care about our status within the tribe. We have a fundamental driving motivation to be liked, to appear intelligent, to seem cool.
And to be perceived as in the know.
Exactly. Everything we share is implicitly evaluated by our brains for its social return on investment.
So we actively, though often subconsciously, choose to share specific pieces of information because passing on that information actively improves our social standing.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
So you're saying we don't just share information because the information is inherently valuable. We share it because the act of sharing it reflects well on us.
Right.
We are essentially using facts, stories, and recommendations to relentlessly curate our own personal PR campaigns.
Yes. If you are at a dinner party and you drop a fascinating, highly obscure historical fact into the conversation, the people at the table don't just think the fact is interesting.
They subconsciously transfer the qualities of that fact onto me.
Exactly. They think, wow, he is a really engaging, well-read person.
Or if I am the one who leads my friend group to a hidden underground speakeasy that no one else knows about, I'm not just providing them with alcohol.
No, you are providing yourself with the aura of being hip and connected.
I love that. So how do we actually do this on purpose?
Berger's research isolates 3 distinct, actionable ways that any person or organization can deliberately mint this social currency for their audience.
Okay, what is the first method?
The first method is finding inner remarkability.
Inner remarkability. Let's dive deep into this because the examples in the research are phenomenal.
They really are.
When we say something is remarkable, we mean it literally. It is worthy of a remark. It is unusual. It breaks patterns. It violates our expectations.
Right. And the classic example Berger points to is the beverage company Snapple.
Oh, the Snapple caps.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this and you've ever purchased a glass bottle of Snapple, you already know exactly what I'm going to talk about.
You unscrew the metal cap,
Yep.
and right there on the underside is a tiny piece of text, a real fact.
And those facts are carefully curated to be highly remarkable. Like, a kangaroo cannot walk backwards.
Or frowning burns more calories than smiling.
Or a ball of glass will bounce higher than a ball of rubber.
Exactly. And what happens the second you read that?
You are sitting in a deli, eating a sandwich with a friend. You read that a glass ball bounces higher than rubber, and what do? You don't just quietly nod and put the cap in your pocket.
It is almost a physical reflex.
Yes. You look across the table, interrupt whatever your friend is saying, and say, hey, did you know that a glass ball bounces higher than rubber?
You feel this overwhelming urge to dispense the trivia.
And why? Because the fact itself is surprising, and by sharing it, you get to be the purveyor of surprise. The remarkability of the Snapple cap literally rubs out on the speaker.
It is a brilliant microtransaction of social currency. And Berger didn't just assume this was happening. He and his colleague, Ruguro Iyengar, actually quantified it.
How did they do that?
They launched a massive analytical study examining thousands of different products and brands, coding them for various attributes to see what actually gets talked about in daily life.
And what was the verdict?
The statistical verdict was unambiguous. Products that possessed higher levels of remarkability were talked about almost twice as often as less remarkable ones.
Twice as often. That is huge.
Remarkability is a massive independent driver of sharing. And this brings us back to that $100 cheesesteak we teased at the very beginning.
Yes, the Barclay Prime story. I want to spend some time on this because it is a masterclass in engineering remarkability into something completely ordinary.
It really is.
So you have a restaurateur named Howard Wayne. He opens a luxury, high-end boutique steakhouse in Philadelphia called Barclay Prime.
Right.
Now, setting the scene here is important. The restaurant industry is notoriously brutal. The failure rate is catastrophic.
Razor-thin margins.
Exactly. And standing out in a major metropolitan city filled with incredible dining options is nearly impossible.
So Wayne knew that traditional advertising, like taking out a full-page ad in a local magazine, wasn't going to move the needle.
Right. He needed genuine buzz. He needed people talking about his restaurant at water coolers and dinner parties across the city.
So he looked at his environment. He looked at Philadelphia's most iconic, culturally ubiquitous street food,
The humble blue-collar Philly cheesesteak.
which is traditionally a highly utilitarian meal. It is chock beef, melted cheese, usually Cheese Whiz and onions, on a hoagie roll.
Right. It is cheap, it is greasy, and it is accessible to everyone for about $5.
It is the absolute antithesis of luxury fine dining.
Exactly. So Wayne takes this deeply ordinary, lowbrow cultural staple, and he intentionally engineers a staggering level of cognitive dissonance into it.
He doesn't just make a slightly better cheesesteak.
No, he elevates it to a level of complete absurdity. He starts with a house-made, freshly baked brioche roll.
Sound good so far.
Then he layers it with thinly sliced, perfectly marbleized Kobe beef, some of the most expensive meat on the planet.
Wow.
He adds shaved heirloom tomatoes, caramelized onions, and triple cream taleggio cheese.
That sounds incredible.
And then he tops the entire thing off with shaved, hand-harvested black truffles and a massive butter-poached Maine lobster tail.
A lobster tail on a cheesesteak.
Yes. And just to ensure the presentation matches the audacity of the ingredients, he serves it alongside a chilled split of Veuve Clicquot champagne.
And he puts it on the menu for $100.
Exactly.
The genius of this strategy is entirely psychological. Wayne didn't expect the $100 cheesesteak to be his primary profit driver.
Right. He wasn't relying on massive volume sales of this specific item.
He was using the sandwich as a vehicle for inner remarkability. Think about the sensory and conceptual contrast.
The juxtaposition of a blue-collar street food aggressively colliding with ultra-luxury ingredients.
It creates a narrative friction that the human brain finds irresistible.
I mean, just hearing you list those ingredients makes me want to pause this recording, call my brother, and tell him about it. And I don't even live in Philadelphia.
And that is exactly the psychological mechanism Wayne was banking on. It ceased to be just a meal. It became a cultural conversation piece.
The people who went to Barclay Prime and ordered it didn't just consume the calories.
No, they took out their early flip phones, took grainy pictures of it, and told literally everyone in their social radius.
Businessmen would take clients there just to order it for the table as a starter, almost as a theatrical performance.
And why? Because, as one customer perfectly articulated to a reporter, Ordering that sandwich gives you absurd storytelling rights.
Storytelling rights. I love that phrase. You are walking into that restaurant and handing over a $100 bill, and in exchange, you are purchasing the social currency of being the guy who ate or even just witnessed the legendary $100 sandwich.
And the return on investment for the restaurant was astronomical. They didn't have to buy media space because the media came to them.
USA Today wrote about it. The Wall Street Journal covered it.
David Letterman brought Howard Wayne onto The Late Show to cook it on national television.
The sheer remarkability of the product allowed it to effortlessly slice through the clutter of the Philadelphia dining scene.
It is a perfect demonstration that you don't need a massive budget. You just need to find the extreme, surprising edge of whatever it is you are offering.
So, step one for minting social currency is finding your inner remarkability. Find the truffle on your cheesesteak. What is the second method?
The second way to mint social currency is by leveraging game mechanics.
Okay, how does that work?
This taps into a slightly different but equally powerful evolutionary drive. Our obsession with hierarchy and status.
Like keeping score.
Exactly.
Huh?
Think about the structure of frequent flyer miles. Berger discusses a colleague of his who's a platinum medallion member with Delta Airlines.
Right.
This status is completely arbitrary. It is a tiered system invented by a corporation. Yet, whenever this individual flies, he finds highly creative, subtle ways to broadcast his status to his social network.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
He will post a mild complaint on social media about the espresso machine being broken in the first-class VIP lounge.
Or he will post a photo of the runway complaining about a slight delay, making sure his complimentary first-class upgrade ticket is visibly resting in the corner of the frame. The humble brag. It is the classic humble brag. He isn't actually complaining about the coffee. He is using the complaint as a Trojan horse to announce to his entire network that he has access to the VIP lounge.
Precisely. Game mechanics like points, loyalty levels, tiered statuses, or digital badges on apps like Foursquare are incredibly effective because they quantify our performance.
They take something abstract, like how much you travel, and they give it a hard metric.
They tell us exactly where we stand in relation to our peers.
Yeah.
Humans are inherently comparative creatures. We want to be at the top of the local hierarchy.
And I'm guessing this is the critical linchpin of the strategy. What good is achieving a high status if no one else in your tribe knows you have achieved it?
Exactly. If the status is hidden, it generates no word of mouth.
I love this because it exposes our underlying vanity in such a clever way. If we achieve a high score in a video game, but the TV is unplugged and no one sees it, it feels entirely hollow. We are essentially wearing these frequent flyer statuses and digital badges the same way a 19th century aristocrat would wear an expensive pocket watch.
Or someone today might carry a highly recognizable designer handbag.
Yes. We use these corporate metrics to show off our personal status. But here is the brilliant part for the company.
What's that?
In the process of bragging about our own achievements, we are unknowingly acting as unpaid, highly enthusiastic marketing agents for the brand.
Exactly. When that guy humble brags about the VIP lounge, Delta Airlines gets broadcast to hundreds of people.
The user gets the ego boost, and the brand gets the free distribution.
It is a perfect symbiotic relationship, but for a business trying to apply this, the lesson is that the metrics must be visible.
Right. You must provide your users with a socially acceptable, highly visible way to display their achievements to others.
It harnesses our intrinsic desire for social dominance and channels it directly into brand transmission.
Okay, so we have inner remarkability and we have game mechanics. What is the third way Berger says we can mint social currency?
The third strategy relies on making people feel like insiders, and this involves weaponizing two very potent psychological concepts: scarcity and exclusivity.
Oh, this brings us to one of my absolute favorite stories in the entire deep dive.
Yeah.
The hot dog stand in New York City.
Yes.
The place is called Please Don't Tell. Now, if you are walking down St. Mark's Place in the East Village, you will eventually walk past a place called Criff Dogs.
Which looks totally normal.
From the outside, there is absolutely nothing remarkable about it. It is a slightly grungy, narrow, late-night hot dog joint. But if you walk inside past the people eating deep-fried hot dogs, you will notice a vintage wooden telephone booth tucked away against the wall.
Right.
If you step into that booth and dial a very specific unlisted number on the rotary phone, A voice will answer.
And then what happens?
If you have managed to secure one of their incredibly rare reservations, the entire back wall of the telephone booth silently swings open.
Revealing a hidden entrance into a dark, luxurious, high-end, speakeasy craft cocktail bar called Please Don't Tell.
The architectural design of that experience is a masterclass in behavioral psychology.
Consider the name of the bar alone, Please Don't Tell.
It is a psychological dare.
It is reverse psychology at its finest. What is the absolute first thing a human being wants to do when you lean in and whisper, I'm going to tell you a secret, but you can't tell anyone?
You immediately want to find someone to tell. The secret burns a hole in your pocket.
Exactly. Secrecy artificially manufactures exclusivity. It restricts access to knowledge, which in turn makes that knowledge scarce.
And a foundational rule of human valuation is that when something is hard to obtain or when information is hard to acquire, we automatically assign it to significantly higher value.
Behavioral economists have proven this repeatedly. If you place the exact same chocolate chip cookies in two different jars, one jar containing 10 cookies and the other jar containing only 2,
Participants will consistently rate the cookies in the nearly empty jar as tasting better and being more desirable.
scarcity alters our perception of quality. So when a patron finally navigates the secret phone booth and gains entry into Please Don't Tell, the experience is intensely valuable to them.
And because it is valuable and because very few people know about it, the urge to share that insider knowledge with their friends becomes an overwhelming source of social currency.
It's like having a VIP pass to reality.
You get to be the tour guide to the underground world.
Exactly.
So taking a step back, the social currency principle is incredibly potent. Whether you are adding a truffle to a hot dog, giving someone a platinum badge, or hiding your business behind a secret door, you are giving people a way to look smart, wealthy, and cool to their peers.
Yes.
I have to push back on the limits of this because looking cool seems like a very fragile foundation for a long-term strategy.
How so?
Well, it might get someone to mention your secret bar once at a dinner party to impress a date, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to keep talking about it every week for the next year. Social currency feels like a match. It burns bright, but it burns fast.
That is a highly astute observation, and it highlights the exact limitation of relying solely on social currency.
It provides an excellent initial spark, right?
It gets the fire started, but as you noted, it does not possess the structural integrity to sustain ongoing word of mouth over weeks, months, or years.
So how do we keep people talking?
To transition from a momentary spike in chatter to sustained, relentless transmission, we must move to the second principle in Berger's framework, the T in step ES.
Triggers.
Triggers.
Okay.
And the fundamental mantra for this section is a simple phrase: top of mind, tip of tongue.
I want to spend a lot of time on this concept because the data Berger presents here absolutely shattered my understanding of how memory and marketing intersect.
It is truly eye-opening.
Berger collaborated with a massive word-of-mouth marketing agency called BizAgent. Now, BizAgent's entire business model revolves around sending new products to hundreds of thousands of everyday consumers and then meticulously tracking how often those consumers actually talk about the products in their daily lives.
Right, so they had a mountain of empirical data spanning thousands of different marketing campaigns.
Exactly. Now, we operate under the assumption that social currency is the only thing that matters. We would naturally hypothesize that highly exciting, remarkable, cool products would dominate the conversations while boring, everyday products would be ignored.
That would be the logical guess based on what we just discussed.
So Berger looked at the data comparing two radically different products, Walt Disney World theme parks and Honey Nut Cheerios breakfast cereal.
And if you survey a room of marketing professionals and ask them which of those two products generates more overall word of mouth, almost 100% of them will confidently say Walt Disney World.
And their logic seems sound, right?
Completely. Disney World is the epitome of a high arousal, highly remarkable experience. It is emotionally resonant, it is visually spectacular, and going there carries a significant amount of social currency.
It shows you have the disposable income to take your family on a premium vacation.
Exactly. Honey Nut Cheerios, conversely, is perhaps one of the least remarkable objects in existence.
It is a beige circle of oats that sits in a cardboard box in your pantry.
It possesses zero social currency. No one has ever tried to impress a date by bragging about their Cheerios consumption.
But the BizAgent data revealed the exact opposite of what the experts predicted, didn't it?
It did. When they analyzed the long-term conversational data, Honey Nut Cheerios generated significantly more overall word of mouth than Disney World.
That is just crazy. Why?
To understand why, we have to distinguish between immediate word of mouth and ongoing word of mouth. Disney World excels at immediate word of mouth.
Like right before and right after the trip.
Yes. In the weeks leading up to the trip and the 2 weeks immediately following the trip, people talk about it constantly. But then the conversation drops off a cliff. It flatlines.
And Cheerios.
Cheerios, however, maintains a steady, relentless hum of conversation year-round. And the psychological mechanism responsible for this is the concept of environmental triggers.
Let's break down exactly what a trigger is in this context.
A trigger is an external stimulus in your environment that subconsciously prompts your brain to access a related concept in your associative memory network.
So our brains are essentially massive webs of interconnected ideas.
Yes. When one node in that network is activated by something we see, hear, or smell, the electrical signal travels down the neural pathways and activates adjacent nodes.
Like when we see a jar of peanut butter, our brain is instantly, involuntarily triggered to think of jelly.
Exactly. When we hear the word dog, the neural node for cat is primed and ready to fire. Berger's profound realization was that we talk about whatever happens to be accessible in our working memory at any given moment.
If a concept is top of mind, it is significantly more likely to reach the tip of the tongue.
Precisely.
Which perfectly explains the Cheerios anomaly. Because Disney World is amazing, but how often does your daily environment actually trigger you to think about a giant anthropomorphic mouse?
Rarely, unless you happen to live in Orlando or see a commercial.
Right. There are very few natural cues in your daily life that activate the Disney node in your brain. But Cheerios.
Every single morning.
Like clockwork. At 7:30 a.m., millions of people walk into their kitchens and sit down to eat breakfast. The environment itself, the time of day, the kitchen table, the feeling of morning hunger acts as a massive, unavoidable trigger.
The environment literally forces the product to the top of the consumer's mind every single day.
And because people tend to talk about whatever is top of mind, the sheer frequency of the trigger guarantees a steady stream of conversation.
It is an incredibly powerful realization. A boring product with a frequent trigger will always outperform an exciting product with no trigger over the long run.
It shifts the focus from the quality of the product to the structure of the consumer's environment.
Exactly. And Berger highlights a fascinating historical anomaly that proves how powerful and sometimes entirely accidental these environmental triggers can be.
Oh, this is the Mars bar story, isn't it?
Yes. In 1997, the executives at the Mars Candy Company noticed a sudden, inexplicable, and massive spike in the sales of Mars bars.
And this was baffling to them because they hadn't changed the recipe, right?
Right. They hadn't altered the price, and they hadn't launched any new advertising campaigns. They were doing nothing differently, yet the candy bars were flying off the shelves.
I love this story. What was the invisible hand moving the candy?
It was NASA.
NASA.
At that exact time, NASA was in the middle of the highly publicized Pathfinder mission, which was landing a rover on the planet Mars. The global news media was completely saturated with coverage.
Every time a consumer turned on the television, opened a newspaper, or listened to the radio, they heard the word Mars.
Now, the Mars candy bar has absolutely nothing to do with space exploration. It was named after the company's founder, Franklin Mars.
But the human brain's associative memory network doesn't care about etymology.
No, it doesn't. The relentless environmental repetition of the word Mars on the news acted as an omnipresent trigger. It kept the word at the absolute top of the public's mind.
So when those same consumers walked into a convenience store later that day and looked at the candy aisle, their brains were already primed.
Without even realizing why, they reached for the Mars bar. The environment did the marketing for them, entirely by accident.
Which, if we bring this into the digital era, perfectly explains the Rebecca Black phenomenon.
Yes, the song Friday.
If you remember the song Friday from a decade ago, it was universally critically panned. People genuinely called it the worst song ever recorded. It had terrible production, nonsensical lyrics, and yet it went massively globally viral.
It racked up hundreds of millions of views.
If you look at the YouTube search data and the Twitter mention graphs for that song, you see a completely unnatural pattern. The engagement doesn't follow a normal bell curve.
What does it look like?
Instead, it looks like a heartbeat monitor. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the song was virtually ignored. But every single Friday, searches and mentions would skyrocket.
The calendar itself provided an unavoidable weekly trigger. She hijacked the seventh day of the week.
That is a perfect modern example. And the critical insight for businesses and creators is that you don't have to wait for a NASA mission or rely on a day of the week. You can actively engineer these connections.
You can, as Berger calls it, grow the habitat of your product. You can deliberately forge a new neural pathway in the minds of your audience.
How so? Give me an example of growing a habitat.
He examines a campaign by the candy company Kit Kat. At the time, Kit Kat was struggling. Sales were declining, and the brand was losing relevance.
Okay.
The marketing team realized they needed a frequent trigger, so they launched a massive, sustained advertising campaign that repeatedly paired the Kit Kat bar with a cup of coffee. The messaging was simple and relentless. Kit Kat and coffee, a break's best friend.
I want to pause there because the strategic brilliance of that is subtle. Why coffee? Why not milk or soda?
Because of the frequency of the behavior, coffee is a beverage that millions upon millions of people consume multiple times a day. It is a deeply ingrained, habitual environmental cue.
So by constantly showing the chocolate bar alongside the coffee cup in their ads, Kit Kat was engaged in classical conditioning.
They were building a new neural bridge. They were essentially hijacking an incredibly common environmental cue.
After enough repetition, the two concepts became linked in the associative memory network. Suddenly, every time a consumer walked into a cafe or went to the break room at 3:00 p.m. to grab their afternoon coffee, the environment itself triggered the thought, I should get a Kit Kat to go with this.
Exactly. They fundamentally altered the psychological environment of their consumers.
Okay, I am tracking with you, but I want to push the logic of this to its extreme.
Sure, go ahead.
If frequency is the most important variable, why shouldn't a brand just try to link their product to the most common, ubiquitous thing possible? For example, let's say I'm launching a new productivity app. Should my marketing campaign just constantly pair my app with the color red?
The color red.
Yeah, the color red is everywhere. Stop signs, fire trucks, roses, taillights. If I link my product to red, I have guaranteed my users will be triggered 100 times a day, right? It seems foolproof.
That is a highly logical assumption, but it ignores the mechanics of how associative memory actually functions under pressure.
Okay, explain that to me.
Berger addresses this specific pitfall by introducing the concept of trigger strength. He uses a brilliant analogy. Imagine you have a paper cup filled with water.
Okay, a paper cup.
If you take a pin and poke a single hole in the bottom of that cup, a strong, highly concentrated stream of water will gush out of that single hole. That represents a strong neural link.
Right.
But if you take that same pin and poke 50 holes all around the bottom of the cup, the water doesn't gush. It just trickles out weakly from everywhere. The underlying pressure is dispersed.
Ah, I see where this is going.
The color red is the cup with 50 holes. In the average human brain, the node for the color red is already heavily associated with dozens, if not hundreds, of deeply ingrained concepts.
It triggers thoughts of Coca-Cola, Valentine's Day, emergencies, stoplights, Target stores.
Exactly. If you try to force your new productivity app into that highly congested neural intersection, your link will be incredibly weak. The stimulus is too diluted.
When someone sees a stop sign, their brain doesn't have the bandwidth to bypass decades of conditioning to think about my software.
Therefore, the key to a successful trigger isn't just frequency, it is exclusivity. The link must be specific and strong. Peanut butter and jelly is a strong link.
Kit Kat and coffee became a strong link.
You need to find a frequent cue in the environment, but one that isn't already overloaded with competing associations.
That is a crucial distinction. It's not just about how often the trigger happens, but how exclusively it points back to you. And what I find absolutely fascinating is that you can actually use this psychology offensively.
Oh, yes. You can weaponize triggers against your competitors. Berger calls this the poison parasite strategy.
This is perhaps one of the most aggressive and brilliant applications of cognitive psychology in the book.
Imagine you are a public health nonprofit organization trying to reduce smoking rates. You have a minuscule budget. You're going up against multi-billion-dollar tobacco conglomerates like Philip Morris,
who are saturating the environment with glossy, high-production advertisements.
How do you possibly compete in that landscape? You can't outspend them. So instead, you hijack their massive investment.
You literally turn their multi-million-dollar ad into a trigger for your own message?
Exactly. The anti-smoking campaign Berger highlights looked at the iconic Marlboro Man advertisements. The rugged cowboy riding a horse through the Wild West.
Marlboro had spent decades and billions of dollars burning that specific imagery into the cultural consciousness.
Right. The nonprofit created a spoof ad. It looked visually identical to a real Marlboro billboard. He had the same rugged cowboy, the same font, the same color palette, but they changed the caption.
Instead of a cigarette slogan, the text simply read, "Bob, I've got emphysema."
It's a devastatingly effective psychological ambush.
Let's trace what happens in the brain of a consumer who sees that spoof ad. You are driving down the highway, you see, "Bob, I've got emphysema." It's funny, it's dark, it registers, but the real magic happens 2 weeks later.
Precisely. 2 weeks later, that same consumer is flipping through a magazine and sees a legitimate, highly expensive advertisement for Marlboro. They see the cowboy.
But because the nonprofit successfully planted a parasite in that associative network, the image of the cowboy no longer triggers thoughts of freedom and masculinity.
No, the cowboy now instantly triggers the memory of the spoof ad. The brain automatically supplies the punchline. Bob, I've got emphysema.
The nonprofit didn't just create an ad, they built a cognitive toll booth on Marlboro's multi-billion-dollar neural highway. Every time Marlboro spent money to show their own ad, they were inadvertently reminding consumers of the anti-smoking message.
It is brilliant and slightly terrifying how hackable our brains are.
So we've covered the first 2 steps. Social currency gives us the initial desire to look good by sharing, and triggers ensure that the idea is constantly bubbling to the top of our minds through environmental cues.
But there's still a missing piece.
Exactly. I am still sensing a gap in the equation. Being reminded of something doesn't automatically translate to physical action. I am reminded to clean my gutters every time it rains, but that doesn't mean I actually climb the ladder.
Right.
What is the actual fuel? What is the internal physiological drive that forces a human being to take out their phone and hit the share button?
And that critical missing link brings us to the third principle in the STEP PS framework: emotion.
Emotion. Okay.
The fundamental logic governing this section is simple but profound. When we care, we share.
Makes sense.
We are fundamentally social animals. Evolution has wired us to share our emotional experiences because doing so helps us form alliances, signal danger, and deepen the social bonds required for survival.
However, Berger recognized that not all emotions are created equal when it comes to driving action.
Right. To understand exactly which emotional states trigger transmission, he and his colleague Catherine Milkman embarked on a massive, data-driven undertaking.
The New York Times study?
Yes, they secured access to the archives of the New York Times, and for 6 continuous months, they tracked and analyzed every single article that made it onto the highly coveted, most emailed list.
Now, I want to interject with what I think most people would assume going into a study like that. The conventional wisdom is usually centered around valence.
Meaning whether an emotion is positive or negative.
Right. We generally assume that people want to share happy, uplifting news, and they want to avoid sharing depressing, sad news. Nobody wants to be the perpetual Debbie Downer of their social circle. So, the initial hypothesis must have been that positive articles go viral and negative articles die.
That was the logical starting point, and the data initially seemed to support it. Broadly speaking, articles with a positive valence were shared more frequently than articles with a negative valence.
No.
But as they dug deeper into the data set, glaring anomalies began to emerge. There were highly positive, pleasant articles that generated absolutely zero sharing behavior.
And simultaneously, there were deeply negative, infuriating articles that skyrocketed to the top of the list and went massively viral.
The valence theory was incomplete. It couldn't explain the exceptions. It wasn't until Berger looked at the data through the lens of a second psychological dimension, physiological arousal, that the entire puzzle snapped together.
Okay, this is where the neuroscience gets incredibly fascinating. Let's define our terms here. When we say physiological arousal, we aren't talking about something sexual, and we aren't just talking about a vague mental state.
We are talking about literal biological activation of the autonomic nervous system.
It is the evolutionary fight-or-flight response.
Precisely. When you experience high arousal, your body physically changes. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear, your heart rate elevates, your blood pressure rises.
Your pupils dilate and your muscles tense.
Your body is physically preparing you to take immediate action to fight a predator or flee from danger. Berger's breakthrough was realizing that certain emotions inherently trigger this high arousal state, while other emotions trigger a low arousal state.
I love to visualize this using a driving analogy. Imagine your nervous system is a car. Low arousal emotions are like stepping on the brakes. They decelerate your system.
Yeah, contentment.
Right. Contentment is a positive emotion, but it is low arousal. When you feel content, your heart rate slows down, your muscles relax, and you just want to sit quietly on the couch.
And sadness is a negative emotion, but it is also low arousal. When you are deeply sad, you withdraw, you power down, you isolate yourself.
In both states, contentment and sadness, the physical urge to do something is practically zero.
That is an excellent visualization. And conversely, high arousal emotions are like slamming your foot on the gas pedal. They flood the engine with fuel.
Awe, excitement, and amusement are positive, high arousal emotions. When you are thrilled, you are vibrating with energy.
And anger and anxiety are negative, high arousal emotions. When you are furious, your heart is pounding, and you feel a physical compulsion to strike out or vent.
High arousal creates a state of physical tension, and the body demands an outlet to release that tension. In our modern digital environment, one of the easiest and most immediate ways to release that internal tension is to hit the share button.
Or leave an aggressive comment, or forward an email. The physical arousal demands action.
This perfectly decodes the New York Times data. Berger found that an article written by science journalist Denise Grady titled "The Mysterious Cough" caught on film went incredibly viral.
Now let's look at this through the STEPS framework. A video of a cough has absolutely no social currency. You don't look wealthy or cool sharing it.
It has no practical value. It doesn't save you money.
But what it did have was a massive dose of high arousal emotion, specifically awe.
Awe is that complex emotion we feel when we encounter something vast and incomprehensible, something that expands our understanding of the universe.
The article featured incredible Schlieren photography, showing a cough moving through the air like an exploding fluid dynamic. It was mesmerizing.
It induced awe, spiked the reader's physiological arousal, and forced them to share it. Susan Boyle walking onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent and belting out a perfect opera aria, pure, concentrated awe. It bypassed the brain and hit the nervous system directly.
And critically, this biological reality explains why negative content can also go viral, provided it hits the right arousal state. Anger is perhaps the most combustible high arousal emotion we possess.
Marketers and brands are traditionally terrified of negative emotions. They scrub their messaging to ensure everything is pleasant and safe.
But Berger uses the case study of the Motrin moms. The pharmaceutical company Motrin released an advertisement that attempted to use humor to describe the physical pain mothers experience when carrying their infants in baby slings.
It was meant to be a lighthearted nod to back pain.
However, a specific demographic of mothers who strongly advocated for baby wearing found the ad deeply condescending and offensive.
It didn't make them sad, it made them furious.
Exactly. It triggered intense, high arousal anger. And because they were highly aroused, they didn't just sit quietly and feel offended, they sprang into action.
They took to social media, organized massive boycotts, created viral counter campaigns.
And they generated so much aggressive transmission that Motrin was forced to issue a public apology and pull the multi-million-dollar campaign within days.
Anger is a viral accelerant.
The crucial takeaway for anyone trying to mobilize a group, say a climate change nonprofit, is to understand this distinction. If you send out a fundraising pamphlet featuring a depressing picture of a starving polar bear on a melting ice floe, you are inducing sadness.
Sadness is low arousal. People will look at it, feel terrible, and then immediately put the pamphlet in the recycling bin and go to sleep. They power down.
If you want them to march in the streets, sign petitions, and share your message, you must transition them from sadness to anger. You have to make them furious at the policies or corporations causing the ice to melt. You must kindle the fire of high arousal.
I am completely tracking with this, but part of me still thinks, surely human beings are more rational than this. We aren't just biological meat machines reacting to heart rates. We evaluate the intellectual quality of the content, right?
You'd think so, but to prove that this phenomenon is deeply, stubbornly physiological, Berger ran an experiment at Wharton that I still think about constantly. The jogging experiment.
This experiment is elegant in its simplicity and profound in its implications regarding the mind-body connection.
Berger brought a large group of university students into a laboratory setting. He divided them into two groups. Group A was instructed to simply sit quietly in a chair for 60 seconds.
And Group B was instructed to jog in place vigorously for 60 seconds.
Immediately following this physical activity, both groups were handed the exact same, relatively neutral news article to read.
Yeah.
They were then asked a simple question: would you like to email this article to anyone in your network?
And the results.
The students who had been jogging in place were more than twice as likely to share the article compared to the students who had been sitting quietly.
Wait, I have to stop you. Let's make sure we are completely grasping the absurdity of this. These highly educated university students decided to share an article about, say, municipal tax policy or a scientific discovery, not because the article was inherently more interesting to them, but simply because they were slightly out of breath.
Yes.
That is insane.
And the mechanism behind this is rooted in psychological theory related to the misattribution of arousal. When the jogging students sat down to read the article, their sympathetic nervous systems were fully activated, their hearts were pounding, their blood was pumping.
As they read the words on the page, the brain, which acts as an interpreter of the body's signals, noticed the elevated heart rate.
But the brain is terrible at accurately sourcing the cause of arousal
Hmm.
in complex situations. The brain thinks, my heart is pounding while I'm reading this article, therefore this article must be incredibly stimulating and engaging. Therefore, I must share it.
The physiological arousal generated by the physical exercise completely spilled over and artificially inflated their perception of the content. That is wild. It explains so much about human behavior. It explains why people get into massive arguments after coming off a scary roller coaster, or why someone might overshare deeply personal secrets immediately after a high-intensity workout. The physiological engine is running red hot, and it just needs an outlet, any outlet.
The practical application here is that any sort of arousal, even completely unrelated to the message itself, can boost transmission. If you are presenting an idea or designing an experience, you need to ask yourself, does this elevate the heart rate? Does it inspire awe, induce laughter, or spark righteous anger? If it doesn't, it is highly unlikely to be shared.
Okay, let's take a breath and review. We use social currency to manipulate how others perceive us. We rely on environmental triggers to keep ideas top of mind. And we require high arousal emotion to physically force us to take action. All of those factors are highly individual internal processes.
But human beings don't exist in a vacuum. We are herd animals. We constantly look outward to gauge our environment.
And that brings us to the fourth principle in the STEPIUS framework: public.
The foundational thesis of this section can be summarized as built to show, built to grow.
I love that phrase.
It revolves entirely around the psychological phenomena of social proof and observability. As an evolutionary survival mechanism, humans are hardwired to imitate the behavior of the herd. If you are a prehistoric human and you see 50 of your tribe mates suddenly start running away from a cluster of trees, you do not stop to investigate what is in the trees.
You start running too. Imitation saves cognitive energy and keeps us alive.
In the modern world, we use this same heuristic constantly. If we were walking down a street in a foreign city and we see two restaurants, one is completely empty and the other has a line of locals out the door, we automatically assume the busy restaurant is superior.
The behavior of others provides social proof.
But there is a crucial caveat to that, right? We can only imitate what we can actually observe.
Precisely. If a behavior or a product usage is private, it cannot generate social proof. If you use a specific brand of toothpaste, no one knows about it because you use it alone in your bathroom.
It generates zero public observability, therefore it generates zero imitation. The goal of the public principle is to take private behaviors and engineer them to be publicly visible. Making things observable makes them easier to imitate, which inherently makes them more likely to become popular.
Let's unpack this concept using a design choice made by one of the most obsessive product designers in modern history, Steve Jobs. And what's fascinating is that initially Jobs actually got this completely wrong.
When Apple was designing the PowerBook laptop in the late 90s, they had to decide on the orientation of the iconic Apple logo on the lid of the computer.
Jobs, deeply focused on the individual user's experience, insisted that the logo should face the user when the laptop was closed on the desk. His logic was that when the user reached out to open the computer, the logo would be right side up for them, affirming their relationship with the brand.
It was a perfectly rational, user-centric design philosophy. However, Ken Segall, the creative director at the time, recognized a massive missed opportunity regarding observability.
Segall pointed out that while Jobs' orientation was great for the user for the 2 seconds it took to open the laptop, it created a massive problem for the next several hours.
When that user sat in a crowded coffee shop, a university lecture hall, or an airport lounge, and opened the laptop to work, the Apple logo was upside down to the rest of the world.
I can just imagine Jobs fuming over that detail. But Segall was right. The people walking by the coffee shop, the dozens of potential future customers, were looking at an upside-down Apple.
Exactly. Jobs eventually relented and flipped the logo. He made the difficult decision to sacrifice the momentary private experience of the single user in favor of maximizing the public visibility of the product to the rest of the herd.
By flipping the logo so it faced outward when open, the laptop became a beacon of social proof. Every single person using an Apple laptop in public became an active, visible endorsement of the product. He made the product advertise itself. He made it public.
But what if you aren't selling a piece of hardware? What if you are advocating for a cause or a behavior that is deeply inherently private? How do you generate observability then?
You have to engineer a public signal for a private act. And there is no better example of this than the Movember Foundation.
Prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and men's mental health are notoriously difficult subjects to generate buzz around. Men traditionally do not talk about these issues.
Furthermore, the act of donating money to a charity is an invisible behavior. You sit at your kitchen table, write a check, or click a button on a website, and nobody in your social circle ever sees you do it.
There is zero observability and therefore zero social proof. Movember had to find a way to take this private act of charity and make it aggressively public.
So they asked men to grow mustaches, which, when you think about it, is a highly disruptive visual cue.
The friction is the feature. For the vast majority of men who are normally clean-shaven, suddenly growing a mustache in the month of November is a highly observable anomaly. It alters their face.
When a man walks into the office with a scraggly, half-grown mustache, it instantly sparks conversation. Coworkers ask, what is going on with the facial hair?
And that exact moment of inquiry is the victory. It provides the wearer with the opportunity to say, I'm growing it for Movember to raise money for men's health.
Suddenly, the entirely private act of charitable giving is transformed into a walking, talking billboard. It generates massive social proof. Other men see the mustaches, hear the cause, and feel the pull of invitation to join the herd. They made the private public.
And Berger also introduces a corollary to this called behavioral residue. Movember requires an active physical change, but behavioral residue is about leaving a physical footprint after the behavior has concluded.
The classic example here is the Livestrong wristband. The Lance Armstrong Foundation created these cheap yellow silicone bracelets. Materially, they were worth pennies.
But they were a stroke of genius because they provided long-lasting behavioral residue. You donate to the charity once, but you wear the bright yellow bracelet on your wrist every single day for the next 3 years.
It is a physical remnant that broadcasts a past action. It is a permanent broadcast of social proof.
The key question for any creator is, does my product or idea leave behavioral residue? But I want to pivot slightly, because what if your product isn't physical at all? What if you run a digital service, an app, or a consulting business? You can't hand out yellow bracelets. How do you create digital behavioral residue?
Okay, yes, this is the Hotmail story, and it is arguably one of the greatest growth hacks in the history of the internet. In the late 90s, Hotmail was trying to grow its user base for its free web-based email service. They were competing against massive telecom giants, and they didn't have the capital to buy television commercials or rent billboards.
So they looked at their own product and realized they had a distribution network built right into the software. They added a single, simple line of text, accompanied by a hyperlink, to the absolute bottom of every single email sent from a Hotmail account.
It read, "Get your private free email at Hotmail."
The elegance of that solution is staggering. Every single time an existing user composed an email to a colleague, a friend, or a family member, they were unknowingly attaching an advertisement to the bottom of their message.
The users became a massive, decentralized marketing department. It provided digital behavioral residue. When the recipient read the email, they saw the social proof. My friend is using this service, therefore it must be reliable.
The product literally advertised itself every time it was utilized, leading to exponential viral growth.
It's the digital equivalent of the Apple logo facing outward. But, and I think this is one of the most important warnings in the entire book, we have to be incredibly careful with this principle. Generating public observability is like playing with fire. It can easily backfire and destroy the exact thing you were trying to build. Berger highlights the Just Say No anti-drug campaigns from the 1980s and 90s.
This is a tragic example of a fundamental psychological miscalculation. The intention behind those campaigns was noble. Policymakers wanted to decrease drug use among teenagers, so they spent millions of dollars running dramatic television commercials. These commercials frequently depicted scenarios of peer pressure, a large group of cool-looking teenagers passing around a joint, offering it to one kid who heroically says no.
The intended message was clearly, drugs are bad, stand up for yourself. But what was the actual subconscious message the teenagers were absorbing?
The subconscious message, the social proof being broadcast into millions of living rooms was, look at all these kids doing drugs. Everyone is doing it. It is the dominant social norm. The campaigns were trying to highlight the danger, but by showing groups of teenagers using drugs on television, they inadvertently provided massive public evidence that using drugs was widespread and common. They accidentally generated social proof for the exact behavior they were trying to eradicate. It normalized the deviance.
It is a staggering oversight. And we saw the exact same failure with early campaigns against music piracy. The recording industry ran aggressive ads stating over 30 billion songs are illegally downloaded every year. They were trying to show the scale of the theft to make people feel guilty. But what they actually told the public was 30 billion times a year, people steal music, they get away with it, and it's completely normal, and it actively encouraged people to join the herd.
It is a profound warning. If a behavior is undesirable, you must never highlight how common it is. You should never say, so many people are littering in this park. You're just telling people that littering is the norm. Instead, you must highlight the positive alternative. The public principle is a powerful amplifier, but it will amplify whatever behavior you put on the stage, regardless of your moral intentions.
I'm so glad we covered that pitfall. Okay, let's take stock. So far, the step-piece framework has painted a slightly cynical, or at least highly utilitarian, portrait of human nature. We share things to look smart and boost our ego's social currency. We are easily manipulated by external cues in our environment triggers. We act out of biological fight-or-flight impulses, emotion, and we blindly imitate whatever the herd is doing public. Is there any room in Berger's research for genuine, altruistic human connection? Do we ever just share something because we want to be helpful?
Yes, absolutely. And that leads us perfectly into the fifth principle, practical value. If social currency is primarily about the sender sharing information to make oneself look good, practical value is almost entirely about the receiver. It is about sharing information strictly because it will improve the life of the person you are sharing it with. It taps into a deeply ingrained altruistic human desire to help our tribe. Berger equates this behavior to a modern-day barn raising. In an agrarian society, if a neighbor needed a barn, the community gathered to build it. Today, we don't build barns, but we do share articles on how to negotiate a mortgage or videos on how to fix a leaky faucet. When we pass along useful information, we are actively strengthening our social bonds and tangibly demonstrating that we care about the well-being of our peers.
News you can use. And the example Berger uses to illustrate this is so delightfully mundane that it proves the rule perfectly. He talks about an 86-year-old man named Ken Craig. Ken Craig posted a video on YouTube demonstrating a specific technique for shucking corn using a microwave. Now, let's run this video through the framework. Does shucking corn give you social currency? Absolutely not. No one has ever gained status in a social hierarchy by bragging about their knowledge of corn husks. Does the video evoke high arousal emotion? No, there's no awe, no anger, no excitement. It's just a man in a kitchen. Are there widespread environmental triggers? Not really.
Yet the video went massively viral, accumulating millions upon millions of views. It spread rapidly across the internet, and the sole engine driving that transmission was pure, unadulterated affection. Practical value. Shucking corn the traditional way is messy, frustrating, and leaves silk all over the kitchen. Ken Craig offered a genuinely useful, time-saving, pain-relieving solution to a common problem. People watched it, realized it would save their friends 5 minutes of frustration, and they immediately hit forward.
It is the purest form of sharing. Berger also mentions a study where researchers listened in on the conversations of hikers taking a break in the middle of a forest. These people are out in nature, surrounded by trees and wildlife, and what are they talking about? They were having an in-depth conversation about the suction power and reliability of different brands of vacuum cleaners.
It seems absurd out of context.
Yeah.
Why talk about vacuum cleaners in a forest? Because one of the hikers casually mentioned they were in the market for a new vacuum, and the other hikers possessed practical knowledge that could save their friend time and money. We are hardwired to share expertise to protect the tribe from bad decisions.
So how do companies utilize this altruistic impulse?
The strategy is to package your expertise in a way that is highly concentrated and easily transferable. Vanguard, the massive financial investment firm, executes this brilliantly. They understand that their core product, mutual funds and index tracking, is incredibly tricky. So they don't just send their clients boring quarterly spreadsheets. They produce a short, highly readable, actionable newsletter called MoneyWise. It distills complex financial strategies into simple, practical tips on saving for college, reducing taxes, or balancing a portfolio. They package their knowledge. What happens? A client reads it, realizes it is highly valuable, and forwards it to their adult children or their friends to help them with their finances. In the process of being helpful, the clients are organically spreading Vanguard's brand visibility and establishing the firm as an authority.
I love that. But Berger goes even deeper into the psychology of value, specifically regarding how we perceive discounts and sales. He introduces a concept called the Rule of 100, because if you want someone to share a discount with a friend, the discount has to feel practically valuable.
This is a fascinating quirk of behavioral economics and cognitive framing. Let's do the mental math live. Imagine you are selling a product that costs $50, and you want to offer a discount. You could offer it for $10 off, or you could offer it for 20% off. Mathematically, it is the exact same financial value, but psychologically they register entirely differently. Berger's Rule of 100 dictates that for any item priced under $100, percentage discounts seem significantly larger and more impressive to the human brain. Saying 20% off a $50 shirt feels like a much better deal than saying $10 off, even though it is the exact same amount of money. The percentage frame makes the practical value appear higher, making it more likely to be shared.
But once the price crosses the $100 threshold, the psychology flips completely.
Exactly. If you are selling a $2,000 laptop, a 10% discount is $200. But saying 10% off sounds relatively minor. It sounds like a standard, unexciting promotion. However, framing it as $200 off utilizes an absolute dollar amount, which triggers a much stronger perception of practical value in the consumer's mind. $200 feels substantial. If you want people to forward your promotional email to their friends, you must frame the value in the way the brain perceives as largest. Under 100, use percentages. Over 100, use absolute dollars.
That is an incredibly actionable, specific takeaway. But I want to pause here and inject a bit of pushback regarding the darker implications of practical value. We established that people share this information because they genuinely want to help their peers. They are acting out of altruism. But the intention to help doesn't guarantee the accuracy of the information. We don't always verify the facts before we try to save our friends. Doesn't this exact same psychological mechanism explain the rapid spread of misinformation?
That is a profoundly important point, and it explains the architecture of our current deeply flawed media landscape. False information, conspiracy theories, and pseudoscience spread utilizing the exact same psychological pathways as the truth. Berger specifically highlights the tragic endurance of the myth that vaccines cause autism. That piece of medically debunked misinformation spread like wildfire through parenting communities, leading to actual measurable drops in vaccination rates and the resurgence of preventable diseases. Why did people share it so aggressively? It wasn't out of malice. The parents sharing that article genuinely deeply believed they were protecting other children from harm. They perceived the information as possessing the ultimate practical value, life-saving value, so they hit forward.
They were trying to build a barn, but they were accidentally burning it down.
Precisely. It is a sobering realization. The STEP PS framework is entirely morally neutral. It is a set of psychological tools, a description of human mechanics. Understanding these mechanisms is critical not just for marketing a product, but for understanding how easily our altruistic impulses can be hijacked to amplify falsehoods.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We have an idea. We give it social currency so people look smart sharing it. We tie it to environmental triggers so it stays top of mind. We inject high arousal emotion to force physical action. We make it publicly observable to generate social proof, and we ensure it has practical value to tap into human altruism. We have all the ingredients. But how do we actually deliver this concoction to the brain? We don't communicate in bullet points. If I just walk up to a friend and rattle off a list of practical facts and status symbols, I sound like a corporate robot. This brings us to the final principle, the final S in the STEPIS framework: stories.
The central premise of this final principle is that information travels under the guise of idle chatter. Human beings have been communicating for tens of thousands of years, long before the invention of the written word. We did not evolve to exchange raw data, statistics, or isolated facts. We evolved to think, connect, and comprehend the world through narrative. Stories are the fundamental atomic unit of human connection, and strategically, stories act as vessels. Berger relies heavily on the metaphor of the Trojan horse.
The ancient Greek myth. The Greeks couldn't breach the impenetrable walls of the city of Troy by force. So they built a massive, fascinating wooden horse, hid their soldiers inside, and offered it as a gift. The Trojans willingly pulled the horse inside their own walls, and the soldiers slipped out.
A compelling story is the wooden horse. It is entertaining, has a narrative arc, it possesses suspense or humor. Because it is engaging, people willingly let it pass their cognitive defenses. They invite the story into their minds, and more importantly, they willingly pass the story along to their friends. But hidden deep inside the belly of that narrative is your actual payload, your product, your brand, or your core message.
The classic example of this, and we have to separate the marketing strategy from the later personal controversies of the individual, is the original Jared from Subway campaign. Long before any of the scandals, the initial narrative of Jared Fogle was a massive, highly effective Trojan horse for the Subway Corporation. Here was a guy who was severely overweight, facing serious health issues, and he managed to lose a staggering amount of weight, over 200 pounds, by eating nothing but Subway sandwiches twice a day.
Analyze why people shared that story. People did not share the story of Jared because they felt a sudden, overwhelming desire to help a massive fast food conglomerate sell more turkey clubs. They shared it because it was an astonishing, highly surprising, and emotionally resonant human narrative. It was a story of transformation against the odds. But, and this is the genius of the Trojan horse, you literally cannot tell the story of Jared's weight loss without mentioning the word Subway. The brand is the mechanism of the transformation. The brand was successfully smuggled inside the narrative.
Which brings us to a crucial, nuanced distinction that Berger makes. It is the difference between simple virality and what he terms valuable virality. It is entirely possible, and frankly quite common, to create an incredibly engaging story or a hilarious video that gets millions of views but provides absolutely zero value to the brand that created it.
This is a trap that advertising agencies fall into constantly. They chase engagement at the expense of the payload. Berger illustrates this by contrasting two massive viral video campaigns, Evian bottled water and Blendtec blenders. Let's look at Evian first. Evian produced a highly expensive, incredibly well-executed commercial featuring CGI babies on roller skates performing elaborate, synchronized breakdancing stunts. The music was catchy, the visuals were mesmerizing, the video was a colossal viral success, racking up tens of millions of views. People loved it. But in the very same year that the video went massively viral, Evian actually lost 25% of its market share.
Wait, they got tens of millions of views and their sales dropped by a quarter. How is that possible?
Because the viral vessel was completely empty. Roller skating babies have absolutely nothing to do with the core benefit of premium bottled spring water. The narrative was completely disconnected from the product. Consumers watched the video, laughed, shared it with their friends, and then completely forgot what brand it was for. They remembered the babies, they forgot the water. It was virality, but it possessed zero valuable virality.
And now contrast that catastrophic failure with one of the greatest marketing campaigns of the internet age, Blendtec's Will It Blend series. You have George Wright, the marketing director for this relatively unknown commercial blender company, with a $50 budget. He takes the founder, Tom Dixon, puts him in a white lab coat, and has him drop absurd, highly durable items into their flagship blender to see if the machine can destroy them. Golf balls, rake handles, and most famously, a brand new Apple iPhone.
The narrative structure of those videos is brilliant. It is a mini-scientific thriller. Will this seemingly ordinary kitchen appliance be able to obliterate this highly advanced piece of glass and metal technology? It creates instant suspense. It induces high arousal awe when the blender actually turns the iPhone into a pile of toxic black dust. But the critical difference between Blendtec and Evian is the placement of the products. In the Evian ad, the water was irrelevant. In the Blendtec video, the blender is not a prop in the background. The blender's core attribute, its absurd, terrifying motor strength, is the entire point of the narrative.
Exactly. You physically cannot recount the story of the video to a friend without mentioning the product. You can't say, I saw this crazy video where a guy destroyed an iPhone, without your friend asking, how did he destroy it? And you are forced to answer, he put it in this insane blender. The product is the hero of the story. The payload is fused to the narrative.
Another perfect example of this fusion is the Egyptian panda cheese commercials. They are incredibly bizarre, hilarious ads where a father and son are in a grocery store and the son asks to buy panda cheese. The father says no. Suddenly, a giant, terrifyingly silent man in a full panda suit appears out of nowhere, stares the father down with aggressive intensity, and begins slowly destroying their grocery cart until they submit and buy the cheese. The tagline is, "Never say no to panda."
I have seen those, and they are unforgettable. And again, the cheese is the absolute center of the punchline. You can't explain the joke of the violent panda without explaining that he is violently enforcing the purchase of panda cheese.
That is the ultimate goal of the story's principle. You must build a Trojan horse. You must weave your idea, your brand, or your message so deeply into the fabric of the narrative that people cannot possibly tell the story without carrying your message along with it.
Okay, we have systematically journeyed through all 6 psychological principles of Berger's framework. Social currency triggers emotion, public observability, practical value, and stories. Step of PS. I want to pull the camera all the way back now. How does Berger synthesize these seemingly disparate psychological quirks into a cohesive, overarching worldview? What is the grand underlying logic of how ideas move through a population?
To tie this all together, Berger relies heavily on the work of sociologist Duncan Watts, who provides perhaps the most accurate and beautiful metaphor for social transmission. Watts argues that we need to view social epidemics exactly the same way we view forest fires. When a massive destructive forest fire breaks out, human intuition immediately assumes that it must have been started by a massive, exceptional spark, a huge explosion, or a massive lightning strike. In the marketing world, we assume that massive spark must be a multi-million-dollar ad campaign or an endorsement from a massive celebrity influencer. But Watts points out that the size of the initial spark has almost nothing to do with the ultimate size of the fire. A massive fire is entirely dependent on the presence of thousands of acres of dry kindling. If the environment is right, if the trees are dry and close together, a tiny microscopic spark from a discarded match can burn down a continent.
Oh, I see where this is going. The STEP PS framework is the dry kindling.
Precisely. You do not need to hunt for a massive spark. You do not need to pay an influencer $1 million. Your job is to prepare the environment. Your job is to engineer your message so that when it lands on one ordinary person, one ordinary tree, it immediately catches fire, and that person naturally passes it to the next ordinary person. The STEP-ES framework is the chemical treatment that makes your idea highly flammable.
And I think it is really important to clarify here because Berger is very specific about this in the research. You absolutely do not need all 6 step PS for an idea to catch fire. Trying to cram all 6 into a single idea can actually feel disjointed. He compares the framework to a recipe, specifically a salad. A great Cobb salad might have grilled chicken, heirloom tomatoes, bacon, avocado, and blue cheese. The more toppings you have, the richer the experience. But a salad with just 2 fantastic toppings, say, just really crispy bacon and great cheese, is still a delicious salad.
That is the versatility of the framework. If your product is a commercial blender, it already possesses inherent practical value. You don't need to force social currency into it. But George Wright took that practical product and added high arousal, emotion, awe, and a great story to make it viral. If you are selling a $100 cheesesteak, you don't need practical value. You lean entirely on social currency and remarkability. It is not a rigid mathematical formula where missing one variable invalidates the equation. It is a toolbox. You select the psychological tools that best amplify the natural strengths of your message.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to be very specific about who this research is actually for. Because throughout this conversation, we've bounced between massive multinational corporations like Apple, Mars, and Kit Kat, and incredibly small grassroots examples like a guy shucking corn or a hot dog stand in New York.
The beauty and the true utility of Berger's work is its universal applicability. This framework is essential for an incredibly broad, diverse audience. If you are a small business owner, a baker, or a software developer with absolutely zero marketing budget, this is your tactical playbook. This is how you generate massive buzz and compete with giants without spending a dime. If you are a nonprofit organizer trying to rally a community around a local cause, understanding how to transition your audience from low arousal sadness to high arousal action, and how to make private donations publicly observable is the key to your survival. It is for public health officials trying to design campaigns that don't accidentally encourage the behavior they want to stop. Or honestly, it's for any curious learner who simply wants to understand the invisible forces shaping their own behavior. It proves that you do not need a massive digital platform or a bottomless budget to generate impact. You just need a profound mechanical understanding of human psychology.
I couldn't agree more. We have had an absolutely incredible time unpacking the literal science of social transmission with you today. But I want to be honest, even in this extensive deep dive, we have merely skimmed the surface of Jonah Berger's research. We've touched on the concepts, but the book is packed with decades of empirical data. If you are listening to this and you feel like this framework could genuinely, tangibly help you in your business, your creative projects, or your daily life, there is a complete audio available. It is several hours long. It covers every single chapter and study in incredible depth, providing far more examples and highly actionable takeaways that you can start applying immediately. It isn't a sales pitch. It's genuinely the best next step if you want to master this material. Check the link in the description if you want to go deeper into the science.
And as we wrap up our time together, I want to leave you with one final, perhaps slightly unsettling thought to mull over. We navigate our days believing we are highly rational, autonomous agents. But the next time you find yourself instinctively hitting the share button on a video, or the next time you lean across a table to eagerly tell a friend about a new restaurant you tried, I want you to pause for just 1 second. Ask yourself a critical question. Did you consciously, rationally decide to share that information? Or were you invisibly triggered by an environmental cue you didn't even notice? Were you flooded with physiological arousal from a carefully engineered moment of awe or anger? Were you subtly pushed by a subconscious evolutionary need to earn social currency within your tribe? We like to think we are the ones in control of the information we spread. But when it comes to the science of social transmission, we have to ask, are we the ones spreading the virus? Or is the virus controlling us?
That is a staggering final thought. You walk into a restaurant thinking you're just ordering a sandwich, or you go online to buy a blender, and you suddenly realize you are just a single node in a massive, invisible psychological network, perfectly executing the Step PS framework without even realizing your brain has been hacked. It is going to make me look at every single conversation and every single retweet completely differently from now on. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.